I'm Elaine Shuck, and I work for i2i Technologies, and one of the things that we love doing is bringing opportunities to students and educators. And I always think about how am I going to introduce Mr. Stovall, because it was funny, we've been doing this video conference with him since 2006. We had a huddle on Friday, Sue Porter and Mary Kay, thinking about how long we've been doing this. And Jim Stovall is many things, but today he's an author and a motivational speaker, and I'm sure you guys have done your homework as to all the other things that he has done, and if not, you can ask him. And one of the things that was mentioned while we were having our huddle, for as many years as we've been doing this connection, is that Mr. Stovall is a kind man. That came up many times. I've also invited a friend of mine who used to be a media specialist, and she was excited because she was one of the first ones to do this, 12 years ago. Also don't want to leave out Kelly Morrison. She is a singer and songwriter, and she's in the back listening to our conversation, so I didn't want to leave her out as well. So I know we're going to have a lot of great questions, so I want to pass it on to Jim to say a few words, and then we'll take our first 3 questions from Mesa Verde Middle School. So it's all yours, Jim, and thank you for participating today. It's always a pleasure.
Well, my thanks to you, Elaine, and it's always good to do these, and I want to thank you and Sue and Roxanne and everybody on your end that makes this possible, and of course Kelly here that works out all of the details to make this possible. I want to thank all the teachers and the students. When you have people who read your book and really dwell on it and think about it and ask questions and consider what it might mean to them, it really means a lot to you. And at this point, as the author of over 40 books, and 8 of them now have been turned into movies, I just really I can't help but remember a time in my life when this wasn't a reality. I mean, I'm embarrassed to tell you, as a best-selling author, there was a time in my life, I don't think I'd ever read a whole book cover to cover. I was an athlete. I was planning to go into the NFL and make my living as a football player. And then I was diagnosed with a condition that would cause me to lose my sight, and realized pretty quickly there's no blind guys in the NFL. So I became an Olympic weightlifter, and I got to finish my career as a weightlifting champion. And then I started a company called Narrative TV, and we make movies and TV and educational programming accessible for blind people all across the country and around the world. Well, out of that, I started getting asked to make speeches and talk about my company and what we do here at Narrative Television. And out of those speeches, I was asked to write a book. And I wrote a book about my experiences and those sorts of things. And then I was asked to write another and another and another. And I had written pretty much everything that ever happened to me. So when they wanted another book, I decided I better make up a story. And that's the ultimate gift. And that changed my writing career, because now about half the books I write are novels like The Ultimate Gift, stories, and the other half are books of my newspaper columns, or how to do this, or stories about other people, or whatever the case may be. And that has given me so many opportunities. And then I guess it's 12 years ago, with Elaine and Sue, we started doing these, and it's really a wonderful opportunity for me, because when you write books, it's kind of a solitary profession. For me, I dictate to a very talented person down the hall here at our office, and Dorothy takes my words and types them into the computer and makes them look like a book. But you really, it's not like making a speech or something where you have a lot of feedback from people. So for me, it's wonderful to get to talk to you guys and talk about The Ultimate Gift, talk about life in general, talk about anything you want to talk about. So with that in mind, let's do some questions.
Mesa Verde, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Stovall. My name is Austin, and I'm from Mesa Verde Middle School. Thank you for answering my question. My question is, did the person from the Gift of Laughter, the blind person, was that affected by your own personal experiences?
It's a great question. you know, I always think about things as a blind person. So yeah, I have a tendency to put in a blind character wherever I can in my books or the things I do, as long as it makes sense. And I generally do something funny with them. And when I go on stage and speak in arenas or corporate events, I always make jokes about being blind because I realize people are nervous about it and they don't know what to think or say or do because they know I can't see. And so I have a tendency to joke about it. So that's why I made the blind guy kind of a funny guy because, you know, a lot of bad things happen to all of us. And, you know, whether you've had a disability in your life or your family's had a divorce or loss of job or whatever the case may be, we all have things we don't want to deal with. And there's times you either laugh or you cry. And always remember, laughing is a whole lot better because that minimizes the problem. You get on top of it, and that's when you start to find solutions in the world. So great question. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Stovall.
Nice and loud.
Hi, Mr. Stovall. My name is Rachel. Thank you for answering my question. My question is, if you could meet one character from The Ultimate Gift and spend an hour with them, who would you want to meet?
If I could meet one character, great question, Rachel. I would probably pick Red Stevens because Red is a character that's a compilation of a lot of people I've known in my life, all put together. Some people I met, some people I only read about and things. So, yeah, he's kind of a compilation of that. And, you know, building on what I was talking about a minute ago, there was a time in my life when I could read like you guys do with my eyes. I never read a book at all. After losing my sight, I discovered audiobooks and high-speed listening. And today I read a book every day. There hasn't been a day in many, many years I haven't read a whole book, cover to cover. And that has changed my life. And so learning about other people helps me put together a character like Red Stevens. So I would probably pick on Red and spend the day and hang out with him. So thank you. Great question.
Hi, Mr. Stovall. My name is AK. Thank you for answering my question. My question is, do you believe it is truly possible not to have a single bad day?
Truly possible not to have a bad day? I think it is truly possible to make all your days positive. There are bad things that happen to good people, but I think it's truly possible to, in retrospect, have all your days be good ones. Being blind is a bad thing for me. But when I look back at all the things that have happened because of it, I see a lot of great things that have come out of it. One of my mentors was a guy, Coach John Wooden. He won more basketball championships than anybody ever has, probably ever will. And he died just before his 100th birthday, and he was a great friend of mine. And he always said, things turn out best for those who make the best out of the way things turn out. And so every time you have a problem, a disaster, an adversity, I'm not saying that's not a bad thing. What I'm saying is somewhere in that is an opportunity, is a positive, because for every person that has a disaster in their life, I can show you someone else that had the same thing, but they turned it into, you know, an overall positive thing in their life. So thank you. That's a great question.
Okay, St. Killian's, we're ready for your 3 questions.
So we're going to come up a little bit. We're going to come up.
Hi, Mr. Stovall. My name is Alex. Thank you for answering my question. My question is, are you going to make your will look a little bit like Red Stevens is?
Interestingly enough, my will does look a lot like Red Stevens's. And, you know, I leave a lot of money to different people and causes and charities, but I want them to know why that is. And it's not just a here you can have this, as much as it is here is my gift, and it's also my expectation of what I hope you will do with this money and why it's there. So I think my will should look a lot like that. And I have the opportunity to work with a lot of wealthy people around the world who have read the same book you read, and they want to do the same thing with their children or grandchildren. And I think that's an important thing in your life. So thank you. Great question.
Hello, Mr. Stovall. My name is Lauren, and my question is, other than the books you've written, what are some of your favorite books to read?
I have probably my favorite author of all time is in South Dakota. We have some people we're talking to today from South Dakota, and a guy named Louis L'Amour from Jamestown, South Dakota, and he wrote over 100 historical novels. I've read all of them, and probably one of the best narrative writers I've ever read, because he had the ability to keep you interested in this story, and before you realized it, you learned a lot of stuff you never knew before. So I think he was a great, great writer. And then I've had the opportunity over the years to go back and read a lot of stuff that I was supposed to read in school and didn't pay as much attention to as I should have. So I've gone back and enjoyed, things like Charles Dickens and Great Expectation, and Steinbeck's of Mice and Men, and really even Dante and the Inferno, and some amazing writers that, unfortunately, when you read things in school, if you're not careful, you get caught up in just getting the stuff out of this I have to get through the test or write my book report. And don't do that if you can help it. And if you can't help it, make a promise to yourself someday you'll go back and really read those books, because there's some really, really great stuff. Thank you. Good question.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Stovall. Thank you for answering my question. My name's Avery. My question is, how long did the whole writing process of the book take?
I have written over 40 books, and The Ultimate Gift was the easiest and fastest book I ever wrote. So keep that in mind. I wrote that book in 5 days, in between my meetings and my calls here at work. And that story just kind of came out. And I really didn't know what I was going to write about when I started it. When I began that book, the only thing I had in my mind was the first line of that book, which says it was my 80th year of life on earth and my 53rd year in the practice of the law, that I was to undertake an odyssey that would change my existence forever. So I dictated that, and I had Dorothy read it back to me, and then I thought, who said that, and what's he talking about? And then I came up with this idea, okay, we're going to have these 12 gifts we're going to deal with, but I didn't even know what the next one would be until I got done with the chapter I was writing. So The Ultimate Gift was the easiest book to write. I've written books that have taken several months to write, particularly when I collaborate with someone else. So great question. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you.
Taylor High School, we're ready for your 3 questions.
Hello, my name is Sergio Romero, and thank you for giving us your time, Mr. Stovall. My question is, do you believe that all your experiences, like meeting Red Stevens and helping Jason, was all due to destiny?
I think it was his destiny I think everything we do in our life happens for a reason. And a lot of times when we're going through this life, all these things that look like chaos and accidents and disasters will turn out to be some of the greatest things that happen to us. Someday in your life, you'll meet a guy who knew someone who introduced you to someone else, and that may be your life's work. And it seems so random at the time. Or you meet someone and they introduce you to someone and then they become your life partner or one of your best friends for the rest of your life. So I think a lot of it is destiny, and I think it was probably a lot of things happened to me, so I would make the Ultimate Gift book, and then the movie. And I never thought I'd be in the movie business. I mean, I write books I can't read that are turned into movies I can't watch, and that's a strange concept. So, but I realize now we've sold millions of copies of The Ultimate Gift, but no matter how many books I sell, there are still more people around the world that watch the movie than will ever read the books. So all that's a part of my destiny. And yeah, I think Red and Jason were destined to do what they did. So thank you. Great question.
Hi, Mr. Stovall. My name is Stephanie Ramos, and one of the questions I had was, what made you write the quotes or inspired to write them for every chapter?
Great question. Where are you guys located in Texas?
In the beginning of every chapter.
In the beginning of every chapter. Oh.
Houston. Okay. I just wondered. Well, I love Galveston, so that's cool. I put the quotes at the beginning of each chapter just because other authors I have known kind of do that. And, I was hopeful that someday people would use this book even as a reference in some way, more than just read it once and you throw it away. And I wanted them to be able to go back and kind of remember what that chapter was about and what you're going to learn in that particular chapter. So, yeah, that's where I came up with the quotes, and they just kind of popped out as we were writing each chapter. So thank you. Great question.
Hello, my name is Brianna, and I noticed that on page 71 that you started to compare certain objects to each other. What was the purpose of doing that? I don't think you remember.
Now you're going to have to help me. I wrote this book.
Yes.
A lot of you, like, what objects are we comparing?
So it says, unfortunately, human beings cannot live in a vacuum forever. A bird must struggle in order to emerge from the eggshell. A well-meaning person might crack open the egg, releasing the baby bird. This person might walk away feeling as though he has done the bird a wonderful service when, in fact, he has left the bird in a weakened condition and unable to deal with its environment.
That's, thank you. By the way, you're a great reader. You ought to be in radio or something. I think I wanted people to understand that a lot of the things we think of as struggles are really just a part of developing the way we're supposed to. And if all of life was easy and simple, we would never develop and do all the things we should do in our lives. I'm quite certain if I'd have been able to play football, I don't know that I'd have ever written a book, much less probably read a book. So, there are advantages in everything we do. And part of them, a lot of opportunities come into our lives disguised as problems. And when you look back on them, they come out good. I had a lady call me recently. She'd read one of my books, and she just went through a horrible divorce, and that's a terrible thing for any family. And she said, not one good thing came out of my marriage. And I said, so those kids are not even a good thing? She said, no, the kids are the greatest thing in my life. Well, I mean, you can't have one without the other. I mean, all the good things that happen to us often came out of difficulties or challenges or, even things we had to struggle through just to accomplish something. So good question. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now at Eagle Butte. We're ready for your 3 questions, please.
What is your message to students?
Laura, you're going to have to repeat that. We could barely hear her.
Sorry, the question was, what is your message for today's students?
Um, Great question. My message for today's students would be study hard. A lot of this that doesn't seem to be anything that will ever have a place in your life actually will. And more than any generation before, you're going to always be a student because you can be an expert in anything you want to study about. Right now, you could be the world's leading expert, and if you don't keep learning and studying, 5 years from now, you'll be obsolete. You won't know anything about it because the changes in technology and computers and all the things we do. But, you're the first generation of students that carries around the answer to almost every question in the world right in your pocket. So it's a new thing, but you're going to have to learn how to apply all those things and, figure out what you want to do in this life because there's a lot of noise out there. A lot of people are clamoring for your time and your interest, and you got to decide what's important to you and not let someone else decide for you. So great question. Thank you.
Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Onia, and my question is, how did you choose which gifts to include in the book?
Did you hear that?
We're going to get to repeat that too.
Okay. How did you decide which gifts to include in the book?
That's a very good question. I think, I started out, I didn't know what any of them were going to be. So I thought, okay, you got this rich kid that's never done anything in his life. And I thought, so the first gift, I want to make him do some hard work. And when I was a teenager, one summer between school years, post holes, and I live here in Oklahoma. It gets very hot, and the ground gets really hard, and I had to dig all these post holes, and I thought that was a pretty miserable way to spend a summer. But years later, when I wanted to have Jason do something pretty miserable, I instantly knew what it was going to be. And then, he had done work. Well, when we have work, then we have to learn how to handle the money, and it just kind of grew from there one at a time. And, I thought about all the things that are important in my life. And it certainly, there could have been more gifts or different gifts, but those are the ones that mattered to me. I've had people from all over the world write to me and tell me about other gifts they thought, that would be important too. And I think that's wonderful. So thank you. Great question.
Okay, our last question is,
Hi, were you ever bullied?
the question was, were you ever bullied?
Was I ever bullied? Yeah, and a guy as big as me, you wouldn't think you would get bullied, but because I was bigger and stronger and a better athlete, I was always up playing with the older guys, and so there's always somebody that wants to bully you. Yeah, I was, and that's something we all have to deal with in our lives, and you almost get to a point where you feel sorry for these people, like you have nothing better to do in your life than harass me. And you have to harass someone else to feel better about yourself. It's a really, really sad thing, and I'm grateful that there's kind of a collective consciousness in America now that bullying is not cool, it's not good, it's not funny, and hopefully there'll be far less of it in the future than there is now. Thanks, great question.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we go on, and Rox is going to give us some questions from the streaming video, you're probably wondering why Rox and I look like twins. And we have a picture on our wall called i2i Technologies. We've been doing this, we said at the beginning, for 12 years, and we have 2 new schools this year that have never participated in the Jim Stovall event. We have Texas and we have South Dakota. So one of the things that we're very passionate about at i2i is creating opportunities for educators. And just before this, I was working with the teachers in Eagle Butte to make sure this happened, and guess what? We were able to make this happen using a technology that we didn't plan on using, but we made it work. So we are very, our company loves to help create these opportunities for you students. And I think Rox might want to say a little bit about that too. She's been at i2i longer than I have, and she's kind of the artistic person behind it that creates all these wonderful things for teachers and for students. So Rox, you want to share a little bit before we go on, so that students, again, an opportunity is understanding what it takes to put something like this together, having an author, students preparing, teachers preparing those students, and then a company like i2i that helps put this all together to help you see how the technology can be used. So Rox, I'm going to pass it on to you for your 3 questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Elaine. I do have questions. And just to kind of wrap up what Elaine said, and actually it goes back to a comment Jim said about, people are very visual and they watch a lot of movies, a lot of video, and we just like to help people, enjoy helping people with video communications, all types of that. And so one of the things that I've been doing today, while you guys have been live and interacting through video, I've been monitoring the stream and the chat, and we do have a few questions, Jim. The first one, actually, you were talking about you could have left out some gifts or you could have added others, but one of the questions was, how did you decide on 12? Is there some significance to that number?
Well, I wanted to have one a month for a year, but I also wanted them long enough so Jason could get really involved with them, but short enough to where we kept the story going. And unfortunately, when you write fiction, there's all kinds of things you would love to do, but you're constrained by time and space. And, my publisher at one point was concerned we could even have 12 lessons and keep the reader engaged. So, but it kind of worked. And if you see the movie, you'll see we kind of combined several of them, as we did in the sequel books, The Ultimate Life and Ultimate Journey and Gift of a Legacy. And so it's the 12 just basically came to have Jason have a year-long project. I think when it first came to him, he had the attention span of a gnat. So had it been, you're going to have to do something for 5 years, I don't know that he would have done it. So great question. Thanks.
Okay. Now, the second question that came in, this one has 2 parts. Okay. So earlier you were mentioning how you enjoy historical novels and even some of the classics and how much you read now and, a book a day. Well, this is a 2-parter now. Is there any type of book you really don't like? And the second one is, there a book that you're like, I couldn't even finish it. So anything you don't like or a book that you haven't finished?
Not really any kind of book I don't like. I mean, there are books I may only read one of, but I think everything's interesting, at least for one book. But for me, you got to remember, a book is a day. I read a book every day. The average person in America reads less than a book a year. If I was only going to read a book a year, I wouldn't read a book on fireflies or sailfish or things that I've read books about. I would read a book about the most relevant thing I could think about. So there are a handful of books that are just so poorly written that it's hard for me to stay with it. And, because when I read a book, I'm a reader, but I'm also still a writer. And, when you see someone that just misuses the language so badly that, you really can't pay attention to it. It's like a movie, but if the movie's out of focus or the camera kept bouncing around or the sound comes in and out, you'd have a really hard time staying with the movie. And that's the way I feel about some people's writing. So that does happen on occasion, but it's pretty rare.
And then our last question, this kind of follows up again on the 12 gifts. People are very curious about that. What about some of the ones that people suggested but you did not include? Do you have some of the favorites that you're like, I just didn't think about that?
Good question. I had people, mention the gift of passion, the gift of peace, the gift of solitude, a lot of those. And I think, any of those would have been really, really great. And I think it's wonderful that people read my book and think beyond the book. I hope people get more out of the book than just what I wrote. I always tell my audiences when I speak to them, please don't miss the power of this message due to the weakness of the messenger. I'm not here to tell you I know everything. I'm here to hold a mirror up to you. I believe people already know a lot of the right things they should do in their lives, and we don't fail because we don't know what to do. We fail because we don't do what we know. And, most people realize what they ought to do. They just can't bring themselves to do it. But when you can put it in a different context and make them think differently, often people will begin to do the right things and create success and happiness and the things they want in their lives. So great question. Thank you.
Right, thank you. That's all I have from the stream now. I have a couple more, so if we come around again, Elaine, I'm ready for you.
All right. Thanks, Rox. So that was a great segue. I know that I'm getting a message that that the Eagle Butte School might need to leave. So they'll be listening in the background, but they've got other things that they need to do. So you keep me posted on the back end, Lori, if you would. So the good segue, the think beyond the book. We're going to go back for our 3 questions from Mesa Verde Middle School. Miss Densmore just wanted to mention some of the things that have happened in the background for those of you who have not participated in this author interview before. She just wanted to mention a few things before we took the question. So I'm going to pass it over to you at Mesa Verde Middle School for your comments, Miss Densmore, and then the questions. Thanks.
Okay, well, first of all, I wanted to thank Jim. Jim, I've been video conferencing with you since the International Tech Fair in 2006. And so, heart, when I think of you and your great work, you really have impacted not only my life, but students and teachers and their families. I think you remember many years ago when we had some fires here in California, and one of the schools sent our school some money for families. That was wonderful, and again, it touched my heart. We had the writing, online writing. I've used it in my own class for narrative writing, and it was great when kids would write stories, and some of them were reluctant writers, and they would model their writing after yours. I've used it in technology, where they show the gifts for social studies of different cultures and how it impacted their lives. So it's a favorite book here. I know the principal grabbed my copy and read it to his book up to going to the Oregon coast. And I have to make it so that the kids can't check it out from the library while I'm reading it because they want to read ahead. So it really has been a great thing, and it really fits the curriculum in so many ways. And I was talking with Elaine and Sue about how I'd love to have you do a novel units where, building on tests and things. And I'm also really looking forward to when you finish the Da Vinci book, as I've been bugging you about, because that is such a perfect fit for our curriculum. And also, the other thing I want to say is what I really like about your book and that you're doing this, it's such a positive message in today's world with our schools and some of the negative things that are happening. I don't want to bring them up. And so it's a really positive message, and it brings hope to the kids. And it's just, I just think it's a wonderful thing. And like I said, when I think of you, I touch my heart because I know how you let people reach out to you and things. And I think that's wonderful. And you are on my bucket list to actually meet in person sometime. So are you still coming to San Diego, or are you not doing that anymore?
I actually am. I'm still out there several times a year. If you will send me an email, I will let you know when I'm going and make arrangements. If you want to come out to Paradise Point,
I would love that.
And you can be in the audience.
Okay, I would love that. I would love it. Okay, well, anyway, like I said, I think you're terrific. And 12 years, I couldn't believe it was that long. So anyway, Okay, so now my kids actually do have questions. So,
Hi, Mr. Stovall. My name is Henry. Thank you for answering my question. My question is, when the characters were speaking, did you put yourself in their position in order to think what about you would say?
Yeah, I always hear their voices and think about what it would sound like. And I kind of play a little movie in my head when I'm writing it. Otherwise, all the characters' dialogue would sound like me. Because when I think of things, like I'm talking to you now, I think of how I want to say this to you. But if Jason or Mr. Hamilton or Miss Hastings were going to talk to you, they would probably say it quite differently. So I have to stay consciously tuned into who am I speaking for right now. So good question. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Stovall. My name is Gail. Thank you for answering my question. My question is, why is there a key on the front cover of The Ultimate Gift?
That came from one of the publishers who had this idea of it kind of being like a diary, like Jason's story. And diaries often come with a key, and I think they also wanted to tap into the key of success and a lot of those kind of keys. So, when you write a book, it's just your idea, but then the more people that get involved, they have cover designs and different ways they print things and, all those sorts of things. And then when it goes to a movie, wow, it's my little book. There are hundreds and hundreds of people working on this movie, and they all have their ideas of what the story should be like and what the movie should look like. So the key was one of those other ideas from a really talented person that put it together.
Hi, Mr. Stovall. My name is Tessa. Thank you for answering my question. My question is, did you randomly pick these names, or do the names mean something?
Yeah, I actually keep a file of names of people that I'm going to use in the future, and a lot of them have to do with people I know, or I'll use their names. Quick example, I just wrote a book in a new series I have. They're called Historicals, and the first one's about President Truman, and then one's about Napoleon Hill, and the third one's about Will Rogers. And it takes place at Will Rogers High School, and there's a baseball team. And all of the people on the baseball team are kind of named after people I know or friends of mine. My father was a minor league baseball player, and his name is George Walter Stovall. Well, the catcher in the story is named George Walters. And my brother, I kind of put together his name and the company he runs, and he's on third base. And my movie producers are out in the outfield, and they're all named after somebody I know, except for the shortstop. I couldn't name him after somebody I know because he creates an error in the ball game at a really bad point in the ball game that nearly cost him the championship. So I didn't want somebody I know to be the bad guy. So, but otherwise, most of the characters are named after people I know.
Okay, thank you, Mesa Verde. We're moving on to St. Killian's for your 3 questions, please.
Hi, Mr. Stovall. My name is Andy, and thank you for your time to answer my question. My question is, what encouraged you to start writing?
Great question, Andy. I was at a speaking event, and there were 2 other guys speaking, Dr. Robert Schuller and Dr. Dennis Whaley, who were both well-known authors, and the 3 of us were speaking at an event, and they really encouraged me to write a book. I mean, they more than encouraged me. While I was out giving my speech, they called their publisher and talked them into publishing my book. So when I came off stage, they said, we need your manuscript in 90 days. And that's how I kind of wrote my first book. And it was a book called You Don't Have to Be Blind to See. And it was my story of losing my sight and going from football to Olympic weightlifting and starting my company and all the things that have happened to me. So I was really encouraged by some friends and colleagues to write my first book. So thanks, good question.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Stovall. My name is Jack, and thank you for answering my question. Is there anything that you would want to change about the Ultimate Gift book?
Yeah, there's always things you want to change. Overall, I'm ecstatic with that book. It sold millions of copies and the movies and all the things it's done. But they made some changes when they turned the book into a movie, and there's nothing I can do about that. But if I had been able to, I would have made them kind of stay the same. I think I'd have done that. And something happened in the movie that I thought was good. I wish I had done in the book. I wrote the characters, never thinking much about who they are and where they came from. And then when we made the movie, the producer and the director came to me and said, how would you feel if Mr. Hamilton was an African American? And I thought, I never thought about what he was. I mean, I don't care what he is. He may be African American for all I know. But the dynamic in the movie of, Red Stevens, a Caucasian, and Hamilton being an African American, at the time they were raised during the Depression and World War II, that was a big deal for black people and white people to be friends then at that point in time. So that came out of the movie after I'd written the book, but had I thought of that, I probably would have put that element in the book. So great question, thank you.
Yeah, thank you too. Hi, Mr. Stovall. My name is Maggie. Thank you for your time today. My question is, what lesson do you think taught Jason the most?
Wow, that's a great thing. I think the gift of giving at the end taught him a lot, because he received all this money and was willing to give it away, and I think that probably was the big takeaway for him in his life, because as that character developed in the next 3 books and all 3 movies, Jason runs a foundation for the rest of his life. And what foundations do, of course, is they give away money to people who need it and can use it most, and make sure it's used wisely. So I think the gift of giving probably helped Jason the most.
Thank you.
Thank you, St. Killian's. We're on to Taylor High School for your 3 questions, please.
Okay. Hello, my name's Ashley, and I was just wondering if you could relate to any character.
Yes,
Hello, my name's Ashley, and I was just wondering if you could relate to any character.
Ashley, probably Jason more than anybody, because, I mean, that's who I used to be, except my family didn't have any money. But, we all have a tendency to be spoiled and entitled and kind of that way until we get our life together and realize we're not the only one in the picture here. And so I think I related well to him. And I hopefully on a good day, I related well to Red Stevens and Mr. Hamilton. I mean, just that whole thing of carrying out your best friend's wishes after you're gone is a pretty amazing concept. So thank you. Good question.
Hello, Mr. Stovall. My name is Amy Dow, and I just want to thank you for taking your time to answer my question. And my question is, in today's society, would you say that millennials are progressively becoming like Jason before the ultimate gift or after?
Thank you.
Millennials, like everyone else, are products of the time and place in which they're born and growing and developing. I mean, my grandparents' generation was called the greatest generation because they survived the Depression and World War II. Well, as great as those people were, they're no greater than the rest of us. It's just they're called on to do great things because of what they had to go through. And I mentioned Louis L'Amour earlier, and he wrote that no person can ever be judged except against the backdrop of the time and place in which they live. Well, millennials are growing up with total connectivity to the whole world, instantaneous information and connection, and it changes who you are and how you work and what you do. Millennials will live in a world where they won't just have one job their whole life. They may learn a totally new skill and be obsolete in a few years and learn another one and be obsolete. Millennials are going to have more interaction with computers and technology and robots than they do with people in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of people forget when you send out a text or you go on Facebook and say something, there's a real person on the other side of that. And so I think where my generation had to fight with how do we connect, how do we reach people all around the world, your generation is going to have to deal with how do we bring the humanity back to that, and how do we treat everyone like people, because you're going to be more connected than anybody could have ever imagined before this current generation. But we do a lot of work with schools and kids and getting to do things like I'm doing today. I'm more impressed with millennials and young people today than any generation I've ever seen. I think you have the opportunity to solve many of the world's problems. So I'm excited about you. Thanks. Good question.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Stovall. My name is Nee, and thank you for answering my question. So the connection that we made was that even though the book was revolved around Jason and his journey towards the ultimate gift, what made you write the book in Mr. Hamilton's point of view and not Jason's?
Great question. As a blind person, you'll find most all of my novels are written first person. Someone tells the story. And because it's easier for me to deal with the environment right around me as opposed to other things going on in other places at the same time. But Hamilton is the only character that had access to both Red and Jason. And so having him tell the story really connects the two of them together and kind of shows the level of dedication he had to both Red and Jason to be willing to do that. And in the next book, it's told by a judge because in the ultimate life, there's a trial that goes on and the relatives try to get things back from Jason, and the judge tells the story because he's the only one in the middle. He has access to both of them. And the third book is actually told by a limousine driver, which, by the way, I played a limousine driver in the first two movies. I always get to play a little part in all the movies, and for almost all of them, I've been a limo driver, and that's been kind of fun for me. And but you'll be happy to know that as a blind person, I don't really drive the car; they just make it look like it. But we actually have a limousine driver telling the story, and then the fourth book, I actually made it, third person where no specific person's telling the story because there's a lot of moving parts in the gift of a legacy. But great question. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to go to Eagle Butte for your 3 questions. I know you guys, I have it back end. Lori says you guys have questions, so go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Adrian. What are your tips or hints for tackling challenges?
Were you able to that?
Lori, could you repeat that, please?
Her question was, what are your tips or hints for tackling challenges?
Give me that one more time. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. What are your tips or hints for students on tackling challenges?
Well, that is a great question. Thank you. You know, we all have challenges, and we're all only as big as the smallest thing it takes to divert us from where we're supposed to be. And it was asked earlier what other authors I like. One of my favorite nonfiction authors is a guy named Napoleon Hill, and I just wrote a book about him called The Top of the Hill. And he wrote a book that has sold over 100 million copies and still one of the best-selling books ever. 80 years later, it's still selling. And he wrote it in 1937, and it's called Think and Grow Rich. And in that book, he outlines 13 success principles, and one of those is every adversity comes with the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Every adversity comes with the seed of an equal or greater benefit. What this means is that if I'm blind, which is a big adversity, or if someone else has a challenge in their life, financial, family, health, whatever it may be, that's an adversity. But somewhere in that adversity is a seed of a greater benefit. So every time from now on, when you have a problem in your life, ask yourself, where is the benefit in this? How can I make my life and the whole world better because of this thing right here? And, you know, if I hadn't been blind, I would not have developed narrative television. And now literally 13 million blind and visually impaired people in the United States and millions more around the world get to enjoy movies, television, educational programming in schools because of my blindness. You know, just because I lost my sight, it's prompted me to go do that. Well, think about every time you have an adversity, there's a seed of something greater, and it's our job to go find it. So thank you. Good question.
Okay.
Lori, do you have another question?
Yeah,
Oh, good.
sorry.
Okay.
With the microphone. We have one more.
Hello, my name is Onia. My question for you is, what gift do you think was or is the most important?
What gift in the book was the most important?
To me, it would probably be the gift of a day, because every day of our life is a gift we have, and what we do with it is our gift to the world. And, you know, if you want to have a great life, it starts by having a great day today. You make today your masterpiece. If you do everything right today, you'll have a good day. And if you do that all week, you'll have a great week and a great month and a great year. And before you know it, you're a successful person, you have everything you want, and you have a great life. But it all begins with today. Nothing else matters unless we do it today. And so I think, you know, you want to think long term. You know, what am I going to do when I go to college? What am I going to do after college? What do I want to do next year? But really, the thing you want to spend most of your energy on is what am I going to do right now, today? And success comes when we do the right thing next and the next thing right. I mean, do it the best you can and then go on to the thing after that. My mentor, Coach Wooden, I mentioned a minute ago, used to always say, every time you do something, you go to your next class, you're writing a paper, you're meeting with someone, you know, whatever you're doing, playing a ball game, you ask yourself, what would I do right now if I were amazing? What would I do if I did everything as if I were absolutely amazing? And if you'll do the next thing like that and the thing after that, pretty soon you will be amazing, and people in the world will notice, and you'll have a pretty amazing life. So thank you for asking. Great question.
Thank you, Eagle Butte. Now, Rox, do we have some questions? We just have a few more minutes.
We do. We've got a couple quick questions. So the first one, Jim, were there aspects of the Ultimate Gift book that did not make it into the movie and you thought they really should have?
If I were going to add an aspect into the movie, I would have probably put in a lot more about the boys' home and that whole chapter in the book. But, you know, if I put everything in it I wanted, we'd have a 9-hour movie, which be okay with me, but people going to the theater might not like it so much. But so that's something I missed having in there. But I understand why they had to do what they did. So good question. Thank you.
Okay, and this is a really quick one. A question came in and said, what is your favorite hobby or hobbies? What do you do when you're not reading books and writing? What else do you enjoy doing?
Well, reading and writing are part of my job, but I spend most evenings reading. I listen to a lot of sports on the radio. I have a lot of friends. I love music, a lot of those sorts of things. So right now it's baseball season, so my beloved St. Louis Cardinals, rarely do I miss a game. So I enjoy those things. So great question. Thank you.
Okay, and then the last one that popped in is, what advice would you give to a young aspiring author?
If you want to be a great writer, start writing. Write every day and read a lot. And you got to be willing to be a bad writer if you're ever going to be a good writer. Just get used to the fact that the first time you write a book, it's not going to be great. And it's the same thing if you play baseball or you want to play the piano or you want to draw a picture. In the beginning, you're not going to be as good as you want to be. So read people that you like, figure out what do you like in their books, and then write every chance you get.
Thank you, Jim. Do you have any last words for these students? We have 2 more minutes. Any last words that you want?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I want to thank Elaine, you, of course, and Sue and Roxanne and Kelly here and everybody for putting this together. I want to thank all the teachers. I know there's a lot of books out there and a lot of things you could have your students reading, and I am grateful that you picked The Ultimate Gift. It means a lot to me. And the students, I would tell you, keep reading, keep learning, keep growing. My phone number and email address are in that book. Anytime you don't think this works, anytime you need encouragement, anytime you're not sure what you're going to do, you just call that 918-627-1000 or Jim at jimstovall.com, and I want to be a part of your success. And with that, I just thank you all, and go have an amazing day.
Let's give Jim a hand. Thank you. You can unmute your microphone. All right, everybody. As Mr. Stovall said, go have a great day. Thanks for attending today. Your questions were awesome.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks. Bye.